right. Hi, Rosie. All right. So, welcome to Queer Conversations with Sharmaine Denise. I'm Sharmaine Denise. And I'm a spiritual life coach, and I help women and queer folks reclaim their voice, confidence, and self worth by reconnecting to their divine and spiritual selves. My goal with starting Queer Conversations is to create a safe space and foster dialogue around the connection between spirituality and sexuality, so that we're able to share stories about our spiritual journeys and how they correlate with our sexual identities and gender expressions. So my hope is to create a judgment-free, open, and honest dialogue, and where we are free to share and listen with curiosity, empathy, and with love. So today I am so happy to be joined with my dear friend, Rosemarie Dominia, who's the founder of Reaching New Depths Coaching. So you're a life coach, a nurse coach, and we met freshman year in college at a Kairos retreat, and we also danced. We were in a hip hop class and workshop together, so we go back quite a ways. So I'm so happy to be reconnecting with you, to have you on this conversation, and yes, let's just jump in.
Let's do it. I'm excited to be here. There's so many memories that come back from when we first met. That was in 2004. So imagine, that's a lot. USF, undergrad, yes. And then how much both of our lives have changed since then and where we are now. So I'm just feeling nostalgic right now in my head as you're talking about it. I was like, yeah, that's right. We were roommates at Kairos. I remember that.
Yes.
Remember they used to wake us up in the morning with a boombox?
Yeah. Man, yeah, that was, we're definitely different people on our journeys, but it was an amazing time. So I am so happy to have you, and we'll just talk. Let's just talk. It's so good.
Let's do it.
So you identify as pansexual, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And I always like to, even though we're talking directly, I always like to confirm pronouns, right? Mm-hmm. So pronouns?
She, her.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. So when exactly did you come out? At what age? What was that like? What did it feel like? Talk to me about that.
Oh man, I mean, since we're alive and doing this show, this is the first time I'm talking about my sexuality out loud. And so before our talk, I was doing a lot of reflection on the questions that you've sent me. And that question in particular, I was like, I don't have one of those stories where I'm like, I was this age and this is how I came out. In college, like when USF started, I just got into a relationship with a woman. So it was my first time being 17, trying to figure out and navigate, through those waters. So yeah. I can answer the question and say I felt comfortable, with who I was at age. It was actually very recent, probably a couple of years ago, where I said, you know what, I'm a pansexual, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. I couldn't identify with being straight. I couldn't identify with being bisexual even, and that that did bother me, because a lot of people assume because I'm like, oh yeah, I like both. They're like, oh, that means you're bisexual, and I'm like, that doesn't resonate with who I am. And from a soul point of view, I'm like, that's not me. Yeah. So, but to answer your question, yeah, like I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, I can say, yeah, I'm actually pansexual and I'm good with that, and that's who I am.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Talk to me about what, so that's about what, maybe 10, 12 years, kind of from being in that relationship with, that was your first relationship, right? Like with a woman? Okay.
Yes. Right. My first, and even, my first serious relationship. So that started in the fall of 2003.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it lasted for 3.5 years.
Yeah. So what was that journey like for you, coming from being in your first relationship with the woman for those 3 years, and then leading up to a couple years ago where you're like, I'm pansexual. I feel good about that. I am me. So what was that journey? What was that journey like from here to where you are now?
Oh my, okay. So to give some context, when I
Yes.
think about where I was back then, it was a very difficult time.
Yes.
And I was raised as a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So in Catholicism, being gay or lesbian or any homosexual tendencies are not accepted by the church. So
Mm-hmm.
my childhood, from even before I dated my ex, the first woman I was with, it that's how my life was defined. It wasn't even a question. It's I will always date a man or have a boyfriend, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when that came about, in my life, when I met her and we connected very well, I didn't really know how to process it. And I was also 17 too. So
Yeah.
at 17 years old, imagine being 17 years old again, even minus the girlfriend. Where
Right.
are we hormonally,
Right.
developmentally speaking? I mean, I was still a very young kid,
Mm-hmm.
and she was actually 9 years older than I was. So I think just that alone, developmentally, we were both in different places.
Right.
But for me personally, I didn't know how to navigate through it because I'm like, this is my first time, really, first off, being with a woman, but secondly, how do I deal with these religious beliefs that
Mm-hmm.
were instilled in me? So
Right.
everything that I was doing was technically a sin,
Right.
and that was hard. That was
Mm-hmm.
hard to deal with. And then I just started nursing school. So I
You're
just
right.
started college. It was one of those things I'm like, whoa, I got hit with two like big things
Right.
at the point in time. I just started college, my nursing program, and I'm in a relationship with a woman. So it felt like, when I think back about it, like everything was changing. But
Mm-hmm.
I was so young, I didn't really know what to make of it. So I just went through the motions. And when I say that, it's not in a healthy way. It's just trying to survive through what this dynamic felt like, to
Right.
be in a serious relationship with someone, and on top of that, being with a woman. And
Mm-hmm.
then battling these religious views, and then having my parents, because my parents found out about it, and of course people around me, it was like coming out to
Right.
everyone, because I had a sense around me that people were just like, what, you're dating a woman? I don't understand that. And
Mm-hmm.
feeling that kind of like negativity in return. So there was, you can imagine, the best word I can use, there was just so much resistance I
Yeah.
felt from different people in my life, and the people who were close to me. And I love them, don't get me wrong, I love who they are, but it was a lot to deal with at a young
Right.
age.
Right.
17. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
what? I didn't get those lectures of like, my parents, I love them to death, but they are, they're from the old school country. They immigrated here from the Philippines, and of course their beliefs are hardcore Catholic. So
Right.
they're, getting used to like American culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? And raising a kid who was actually born in America was also a struggle for them too. So there was
Right.
not a lot of support for me to navigate through these waters. And then I didn't really have a lot of friends who identified as being gay or lesbian either. So I felt
Yeah.
alone. I
Yeah.
know. I'm just like, man, this is opening Pandora's box for me right now, because
Right.
it was so much. It was so much. But
Yeah.
just people who are watching this, just imagine who you were at 17 and trying to navigate through such, multiple transitions in
Mm-hmm.
your life at that time,
Yeah.
whether you start out
I
college, etc.
Yeah, and I can imagine just the amount of pressure, the amount of perhaps shame that you felt too, trying to come to terms with your sexual identity and also trying to navigate your belief system. You were raised Catholic, and
Yeah.
trying to mingle these two areas of your life together, and then also, not really knowing like what this relationship with this woman is going to be like. And when you were sharing that, I was just kind of imagining you at 17 and dating a person 9 years older than you, and trying to, I guess, maybe take cues from her and maybe figure out, like, what is this partnership supposed to look like, or what is it supposed to be. So I'll get back to your parents a little later.
Go ahead, girl.
I'm curious to know, when they did find out about you, like, how did that all go? So I'll come back to that.
Mhm.
So being raised Catholic, let's talk about the spirituality part. Where are you now in terms of your belief system, and how has that evolved for you?
So I can fully say yes, I'm raised as a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I have gone through all anyone who's Catholic, baptism, communion, confirmation, did all of that. And it wasn't until recently either until I got into the relationship that I'm in now. And of course there was, I mean, we'll get back to that. Like there was a gap of me dating women.
Yeah.
So we'll get there. But
Yes.
I mean, once I started dating, I'm in a serious relationship with my current partner, which is completely healthy, very happy. I didn't really start to dissociate or detach from Catholicism until a few years ago too. And so now I consider myself, and I've known this about myself for a while, I consider myself to be more spiritual, not Buddhist-like, but just more spiritual. I do believe that there is a higher power, that there's a universal divine, but I don't necessarily associate with a particular religion. I'm not going to say that I'm this or that. I'm just more of like, I love everyone. My belief is more just having unconditional love and acceptance for everyone who comes into my life. Yeah. And I think that also is reflective upon my sexuality as well. Because once I started, when I recognized that, again, I'm pansexual, I'm like, okay, it's accepting anybody for who they are and connecting with anyone. It doesn't matter what parts are on their body. Right. That doesn't matter to me. It's just more the connection I have with someone. So both of them definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that resonates with me so much as well, because I was raised in a very Christian home with a Christian background. I went to a Lutheran elementary school, Catholic high school, and then our Jesuit university. Yeah. And then majored in theology and religious studies. So, I kept packing it on. But, listening to your story, and I understand trying to navigate those feelings of, particularly, I keep saying, for me, the big one was shame. Like I held on to this notion, because this is also what I was taught. I'm like, being gay is wrong. That's what I've been taught. So, but also feeling like God had such a hand in my personal life, my own personal journey. So trying to understand, like, okay, what you're telling me is that my very existence, who I am born to be, because that's what I feel, is somehow essentially wrong. But then if you're telling me that God also created me, I'm just having a hard time understanding how these two things can exist. So in thinking about, I'm seeing a lot of similarities in how your journey, and then also thinking back on my journey, because I came out a bit later. I came out my senior year in college, and just what a complete train wreck I felt at the time. But I had this inner knowingness that God has my back no matter what. And I've always felt that, even growing up as a child. There's just this knowingness. And I wouldn't say that, I guess you could say I was ultra religious. Like I was very much in the church. I was very active in all of the Christian leadership activities I was in. So I felt like I was wearing a mask, basically, like putting all this out here. I'm a Christian leader. I'm in the choir. I'm doing all these things, and still feeling so torn on the inside. And no matter what, I did, I was always afraid people were going to really see me. And I buried that so far down. Layers upon layers upon layers. And it was really the shame and the fear and the guilt, because I didn't want to let people down. So, in hearing a bit of what you shared, that's what really resonates for me, and really thinking back upon just how much fear I had, and the loneliness, and trying to navigate those waters. It can be scary, but we persevere, and now we're here having this conversation. So
I hear you. No, when I think back to that whole journey of when I had that, when I had my former, like my relationship with my ex, and the first woman I was with, again, she was my first serious relationship. The first person I can say that I fell in love with. And how much I remember, in college, even when we were at USF, I was dating her, and a lot of having to come out to people, because I felt the same things you felt. I felt fear. I felt shame, because in the back of my mind, Jesus doesn't accept homosexuals or those kind of tendencies. So I felt like I was always doing something wrong. And in light of that, just trying to find people who would accept me. So I never really talked about it.
Right.
And that was hard. I mean, I was in a sorority, in college, and I mean, those girls too. I mean, it wasn't talked about. It
Right.
wasn't talked about. So it was really hard for me to find like sources of support in any area. And then being a nursing major, I mean, just anyone who knows USF and the nursing major, we're just jammed with homework and busy work. But there was not a healthy outlet for me. And I mean, even I remember going to like the counseling services because it was clear that I was going through a lot of psychosocial stress, and even joining like a Kairos retreat with a reverend who was there at the time and speaking with her about, my relationship issues. There were some deeper things that were entangled even in just like, I would say this is the start of discovering my sexuality.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a fun one. I'm going to say that much. It's not saying I regret any of it, but it was a very hard one, a very, very difficult thing for me to say out loud because I didn't know what any of this meant.
Right.
Like, I hear you. I can't say it was easy. It was hard. And when I meet other people who identify as being who they are with their sexuality, they're just, some people have these like clear cut stories and they're proud and they have that support from their parents. And I'm like, man, I didn't really have that. I did not have that. Because till this day, I mean, my dad passed away, but my mom still throws some things at me about my sexuality. But I mean, I'm more clear in myself. I'm like, this is who I am. And I ask you to respect my boundaries. Right. So it's.
Yeah, and I am very sorry to hear about your dad passing. And
thank you.
I know we talked a little bit about that even beforehand. So
yes.
How much of, I guess, your religious faith and spiritual faith helped you during that time, of trying to navigate? I love the word navigate. We are using that a lot.
I know, I think that's the word to use. So like, to get through the journey.
Uncharted territory, right? Like, if there's like some sort of lesbian compass or, pansexual compass, I would love to pass on to people. But it's like, it's just one of those, it's a self-discovery, right?
Yes.
So how much of a role during that time did your religious beliefs, religious background, anything like that help you?
I will say this, like when I still was going to church and to mass, when I was at USF, it did help because I saw that overall, it was still a diverse community and very accepting.
Right.
So that made it a lot easier for me to sit in a mass and be like, I can still practice my faith and not feel judged. So I mean, it helped tremendously. I just used it, I think thinking back to it, I used it more as a spiritual, without even knowing what it was at the time, a spiritual haven for me to be myself and feel like I was in an environment and in the presence of a divine power of accepting who I am without judging me or condemning me. So it still played a lot. I still prayed. I still did practice some Catholic beliefs, but in the back of my mind, like how you described, like you just knew that you were still connected to God and you still had that like, wait a minute, he created me, so it doesn't make sense why he wouldn't accept me. I had very similar thoughts to that too, but I always went on the side of, I still believe in God. God still loves me, for who I am. I'm not a bad person in this world. And I'm going to stick with that because the one thing I did learn in theology class from USF is, I'm not stating this right, but one of the beliefs is unconditional love. Like one of the first commandments is having unconditional love for yourself and for anyone around you. And that's the one thing that made the separation of what Catholicism really meant and who created it and who creates the rules, right? That's all I'm going to say. Right. As opposed to a universal rule that we have, that's where I was like, I started to make the differentiation between, wait a minute, and seeing where certain things come from. And that helped me even more to like come to terms with, what, this is not something I can believe in. Actually, I mean, I had a conversation with a priest when my dad had passed away about sexuality. If you want to know more, I won't get into it now, but it was an interesting conversation to have with him. But it was a very respectful one. Like long story short is this is right after my dad passed away. And I asked him if we can talk about something that was bothering me, which was, like butting heads with my mom about sexuality. And I mean, he just said, it was the very core of what the current Pope said about it's not his place to judge, which I totally appreciate because in past in childhood, all I heard from priests was, you can't do that. homosexuality is bad, it's against the rules. But this guy, I mean, he was just saying, you know what, if that is who you are, then practice who you are. It's just in Catholicism, we don't practice that.
Right.
And so that helped me to make the differentiation between, like, you know what, I can't identify as a Catholic, and that's okay. I respect Catholicism. I just cannot fully practice in that role anymore because of who I am and what I believe in. And I was like, hey, clear cut. I mean, this is only recently, this is the last couple of years, but I'm like, I'm good. And that helped me to find peace with, you know, God and Catholicism, and being like, I love what Catholicism has shown me throughout my life, but, you know, I'm going to move on to the next thing that's actually going to help me grow further and foster who I am now. And because I love who I am now, right? This is just the whole thing. It's like, I found who I am. I love who I am. Here it is. But also surrounding yourself with supportive folks and people and beliefs that support you.
And that, all of what you said, yes. All of what you said, yes. And it's so funny because something popped up in my mind when you were talking about, obviously, unconditional love. Unconditional love. I mean, that's at the heart of everything. And that was one of the things that helped me kind of come to terms, was thinking about Jesus and how much love he had for people. And in the work that he did, I mean, you know, I'm not ultra religious now, but, you know, being raised and studying the New Testament and the Bible and everything like that, it just comes down to love. And understanding that helped me love myself, because I spent pretty much the majority of my life hating myself, and I didn't really understand the source of that. That's because I had spent the majority of my life running from who I am because of what I was taught was wrong, and allowing so many other voices dictate how I feel about myself. And that's, and I'm not proud of a lot of the things that I've done. I mean, I've lashed out at people, and that own self-hate had morphed into so many behaviors that were just so, that aren't me, you know, that just aren't me. And so when I tear away from all the ultra religious dogma, all of that, and I rely on my connection with my source energy, with God, with the universe, and thinking back on how my angels and how God has actually protected me, it's love. Love is at the core of everything. And when I realized that, my whole world, everything began to transform from the inside out. And that has happened over the last decade, and even more so up until actually recently, last year, big time. But that's a longer conversation. But so it's so interesting. And so after that conversation, I love that you had a conversation with the priest, okay? And that is beautiful, okay? That is beautiful. And I'm so glad that helped you kind of solidify where you are spiritually, and also just in how you identify and move in this world. That is so beautiful. How has that helped with your relationship with your mom now, and just the relationship with your parents? Because you said you, I don't want to say you got outed, but it sounds like you got outed.
Well, it's so interesting. Like, okay, so if we're going back,
we'll go back and then we'll go for it. So
so I think, let me give reference to what happened back then. So I was in that relationship, and it was I kept it secret for obvious reasons from my family, because more of the religious beliefs. And my sister, who I love, I won't say who it is, but pretty much I told her about it, and she outed me out of fear. And we talked about this later on, and I understood where she was coming from, but I was like, but that wasn't your secret to tell, right? That was for me. So my parents at the time were just, because they're Catholics and they believe in what they believe in, they didn't agree with the relationship at all, but they didn't say anything about it, right? It was more of just like, they knew, but they didn't want to touch more. They didn't kick me out of the house. Right. I mean, yes, for my mom, more so than my dad, of like, God, religion, you better pray, the devil. I mean, those things, and even still, are coming into my life from my mom in various forms. But my sexuality at the time, like they were worried. And when I look back at that, they didn't know how to handle it. And my parents are not, emotionally savvy when it comes to like emotions in general and processing. And that's something I've recognized in my family. So that was a lot. It was a lot. And for my partner at the time, for her to be where she was in her life and as a proud lesbian woman, it was also hard for her to be with someone who was discovering sexuality and being a younger age. So I would say in all, like that relationship, although it was the catalyst to definitely my adulthood and the start of my sexuality, it wasn't a healthy relationship to be in. There were too many things that were we were both so different. It was hard. I can only imagine for her how hard it was to help someone who was very young try to navigate through that when she was already past that.
Right.
So it was a lot. And that from that, I'm not, again, I mean, if she ever watches this, I want her to know there is no hard feelings behind this. And when I say this next, I say it because this is my experience as a 17 to 21-year-old when we were together, but it was traumatizing for me.
Yeah.
So I suppressed it out of fear, not because of what other people thought. It was just like, I can't do this again. And if this is how women are going to be, hell no, I'm not dating a woman again. So that was kind of like the thought in my head at the time. I was like, no, never again. So like, I was like, okay, stopping that. I moved, as the years went by, I mean, I dated men. I would say, I can say this out loud because I'm comfortable. I've dated more men than women in my life. That's just what has happened. And then when I moved to Boston, so like this is like years later. So that was 2007, graduated from USF, and then moved to Boston in 2010 to get my master's as an NP. And my boyfriend and I at the time, we're doing long distance. So he was here in San Francisco, I was in Boston, and I was surrounded by all women. And this is like the first time in years since that relationship. Yeah. I was having these feelings emerge about women. I was like, oh. And it was it was hard because I was like, it was more out of fear. It was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I can do this again. Right. Or like have these feelings, but then the shame started to come up, the guilt started to come up because of the Catholic faith and all this. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this again. So I think at the time I just knew that like, I just had to let these feelings be. What they were. I wasn't trying to suppress them. And luckily, my boyfriend or my ex, like, we're still really good friends, but I actually opened up to him about this stuff. Yeah. And he knew that I was with my ex prior. Like, he knew about my past relationships prior to us being together. So he was supportive. So I was just navigating through it. I will admit, I found myself being attracted to certain women when I was there in Boston. And I was just being honest with it. I was like, wow, so this is coming up for me again. Yeah. Yeah. So to answer your relationship, I'm not trying to go off the wall, but just kind of give you seriously, like the timeline of like what had happened, like it came back into my life in such a different way. Yeah. And the interesting thing was my ex at the time, we were together for 6 years, my ex-boyfriend, we ended up breaking up in the midst of like this part of my sexuality blossoming. So when we broke up, I just started putting myself out there again, wanting to talk to women, date women, and try to figure this and navigate this through a different way of who I was in, let's just say this was like in 2014. Right. Of like, okay, how do I navigate this through too? Now I'm going to fast forward. I know I'm jumping. Sorry, jumping a little bit. But to answer your question about my parents, when Una, my current partner, came into my life, we've been dating for 2 years. I was in a much better place with myself. Like, I started my self-love journey in 2014, being who I am. Like, this is 2018. I was proud to date her because I already knew. I was like, you know what? I can date anyone. And I had to accept, I'm like, wow, I am. I'm like, when the term pansexual came up, I think I'm more old school and late to the game of knowing these terms. I was like, oh, that's what that means. Because my niece was like, I told my niece, she's like, oh, you're pansexual. I was like, pansexual? Really? She was like, yeah, Miley Cyrus says. I was like, who? I was like, oh, okay. I was like, so I'm like, okay, now I get it. But it was like a natural thing that I felt within myself that you just know that that's who you are. It's like your soul is telling you, yes, you finally know in your human form that this is who you are and you're okay with that. So I accepted that. I was like, that is who I am. I can love anyone no matter what. So by the time my current partner came into the picture, I mean, I was in a much better place to tell people of who I was. And you talked about this very key component of owning yourself first. Yeah. Right. That if you can own yourself and love yourself from this very whole place, then anyone else's opinion is not going to matter at that point. Correct. Because you know who you are. And so if I translate that back to 2006, when I was 17 dating a woman, of course I couldn't. Of course, that's why the shame and the doubt came up, because I didn't know who I was.
Correct.
I didn't know, I couldn't love myself or accept myself. And that's the growing pains I had to go through with my sexuality. So before my dad passed, the last serious conversation I had with him, and I know I discussed this with you, but it was such like I'm glad this was our last serious conversation, was Thanksgiving of 2018. And I told him about Una.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't care about the sex as long as you're happy and safe. And it makes me want to like tear up, because because the way my dad felt, you know, when 2006 with my ex, like he did not accept that at all. He was just like, no, like that's not what I want for you. But now, like, coming to who I am, like who I was in 2018, he was like, no, I just want you to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just like all good with it. My mom, on the other hand, I mean, I told her, a little harder to convince because she is much more of a hardcore Catholic compared to my dad.
Mm-hmm.
She has her beliefs, and until this day will sometimes throw certain things at me from some Catholic beliefs.
Right.
They have parents who like do that. They kind of like embed or imply their like beliefs on you. And but I'm in a much better place to handle it. I do have boundaries around her, and I just said, we're gonna agree to disagree on certain things, but I want you to remember that this is who I am now. This is who I accept. But she knows my partner too. They both have met my partner.
Mm-hmm.
I have a stepson. She has a son. They accept her for who she is, and I think they're seeing beyond that, right? They're seeing that actually, oh, Rose is happy for once in her life. After everything else she's been through, like, I'm the emotional being in my family. Like, she's happy. And I think that, even though she has her beliefs and she doesn't fully agree with it, she can't accept it because her daughter's happy.
Right.
So, but even for me to get there, I had to love myself and own that first. Or anything else. Because if I was unsure of myself, I think, it'd be easier for people to manipulate or control me. Yeah. Right? That would have been a huge thing. But now, like, doing my own journey and being like, this is who I am, and I'm proud of myself for who I've become, it was a lot easier to navigate everyone else's stuff. So I was just like, I can accept that's what you believe in. This is what I believe in, and that's okay.
Yeah. What a beautiful and scary and hard and just challenging journey and time. And what an amazing way to spend, some of your last memories and moments with your father before he passed, for him to actually, talk to you and say, I love you no matter what, I accept you, and just to receive that support and validation, and to just have that to hold on to, and just, remind you of just how much love that your father had for you and still does, and to see how your mom is kind of, maybe she's not all the way there, but she's where she's supposed to be. Exactly. And to really just love and support you anyway. And that is amazing. That is amazing. And I'm sure you feel that too. And maybe some sort of peace and maybe even relief there that, she also had her own process while you were also processing.
Exactly. So, exactly. I mean, I had to come to realize too, and this relates to my sexuality, but also any other decision I've made in my life, is recognizing and accepting who each person in my family is, and friends, of what they can offer in my life, what their beliefs are, and accept that. I think sometimes we kind of run into dead ends when we have these expectations that, for even just talking about sexuality alone, I want them to accept me. I want them to accept me.
Right.
But that is like, I think when you have that expectation, you have the conversation, it doesn't go well. I mean, it doesn't necessarily reflect them because they are who they are. You can't change someone, but I think it kind of comes back to who you are and what you want from that, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, I mean, there was a lot of inner work, even when I've had these conversations, to know that, oh yeah, I know my mom is not going to disagree. She doesn't believe in Catholicism. Like, I just knew the realistic facts about what was going to happen.
Right.
And that didn't hold any attachment to it. I was just being myself, bringing myself to the table, and being fully honest and loving and kind with that. Yes. And that was also the intention of having, when I had that conversation with her about dating my current partner, that's where it came from.
Yeah.
but it was a lot of preparation first and foremost for myself. I had to really connect to my own spirituality and what I believed in and myself and my values first before bringing this to the table again for my family. Because I knew that, like, you know, how many years later, this was like 2006, and then dating another woman in the start of 2018. It's been quite some time.
Right.
But also for me, there's been a lot of growth and change of how I see myself.
Yeah.
I think it's always going to come back to that, is how you see yourself, how much you believe in yourself and know yourself and can accept yourself without anyone else's approval. Who you are is just going to be a natural flow in life. And whatever other people think, it's not going to matter, essentially. It matters like how much of your own inner happiness and your own love for yourself, that's what's going to matter. And that's not selfish or narcissistic. It's just who you are. People are always going to have their opinions and judgments no matter what you do, whether it's good or bad. It doesn't matter. People will always have an opinion.
Correct.
It's what you think, you know, within yourself and who you are, like the core of you.
Yeah.
I call that, like, for me, I call that the true inner Rosie.
Right.
Who is true inner Rosie in this? Yes, Rosie still has ego sides and all this stuff, but who are you at the core when your ego is calm and quiet?
Yeah. And I agree 100%. And you hit on a few things in what you just said. One, you can meet people where they are. You can only meet people where they are, right? And you talked about coming to the table and also releasing that attachment to that outcome, you know, and having that expectation, because that way you freed yourself up from the conversation. You freed yourself up from however she was going to receive you and receive what you were going to say. And that takes a whole lot of time, effort, patience, and I think with that attachment, I mean, that is, you talked about the ego, you know, like that's where we just want, it's the me. I want you to please accept me, please accept me. And it's like, at the core of everything, you know, we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. Okay. Yes. And oh my God, I just lost some points I was going to But yeah, understanding, recognizing yourself, getting in touch with your inner Rosie, my inner Sharmaine, loving that part of myself, healing those wounds from, you know, that go back to childhood, that go back to experiences that were not pleasant, and healing those parts and loving those parts anyway, and understanding that that is all a part of what makes me me and why I'm here. So, so that kind of leads me into my next question. So, do you believe there is a link between sexuality and spirituality? And it sounds like from your story and your journey and everything that you shared, there is definitely a link there for you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Ooh, so I would say the main link that is spirituality for me. We talked about the word unconditional. You know, unconditional love, unconditional kindness, unconditional acceptance. And for me, where my sexuality played, and this is where the link came for me, it was just like, if love was just the concept, you would love anybody. Gender, sex, they're all just labels that we have created as humans to define things. But what's above the label? That even comes to, and I'm not putting any religions down, not at all. It's just what is beyond religion too. It's just unconditional love. And one of my spiritual teachers, this is like a person who I worked with for Reiki. I love Janice, that's her name. Janice is amazing. But when I trained with her a couple months ago, you know, one of the things she had said to me that really stuck out is as human beings, we are stuck in this container of polarity. Like good, bad, black, white. But what we're trying to get to is what exists above that. And that is acceptance of everything. So if that makes sense, that's where like the link of spirituality and sexuality come for me. Essentially what you're loving, and you said this earlier, you said it beautifully, is loving the person and just their soul, nothing else. You're just loving the essence of who they are, regardless of that. And that is something for me personally, I accept about myself, and that's who I am. because I will love someone, and this goes with my professional, like my professional job, like as a nurse and as a coach. Like I will accept any client for who they come, no matter what. It doesn't matter, because we all come, as you said it too beautifully, we are all here, and we're all experiencing what it's like to be human.
Correct.
And navigate through life being human. No matter what you believe in, we're all experiencing it in different ways, but we're all going through the same thing, essentially. Not the same situation,
right.
Not the same circumstance. We all have different things, but we're all here navigating through what it's like to be a human being on Earth.
Right.
But I always ask that question, like, what's above that? I don't really have a lot of conversations like that with a lot of people unless they can go above, because they're like, what are you talking about? That's just some woo stuff. I'm like, that's not woo-woo.
No, it's not woo-woo. It's not.
But, you know, it's a different kind of thinking. If you think beyond what's beyond the label, or beyond, we're all light. We're all souls. We all have hearts. We have feelings. We express emotions.
Correct.
But at the end of the day, what brings us the most happy, like what ties us all together, is that love. And acceptance. I totally agree with you. So it's
love beyond the labels, you know, because our minds, we have to categorize things, right? We like boxes. We like it nice and orderly.
Exactly.
Right? And beyond that is the love and the compassion and, you know, our essential truth. Like this is who we are. We shed all those labels. We shed all that away, and we connect with our humanness, right? And it can be challenging, but that's the point. That is the point. Love is the point, and love is at the center of it all. And that's why I love having these conversations.
I love it. I love it.
I love it. And I know that in my personal life, I mean, when I have these conversations come up, this is where I find the most value, all the richness, is when I get to sit and talk heart to heart, soul to soul about things that, I mean, this is what really matters. Love is at the center. So when I get to sit and have these conversations and shed all that other stuff away, and we get to just be in existence with each other and connect on that level, it's the prime of life for me. And so
it's a beautiful thing, and it's sad to say this, but it's also can be a rare thing these days to really connect with someone and just be present. Just be present, not just, and connect. I mean, I get that, like, it's especially with current times that are going on, like it's you know, the connection now, like now we have the physical contact that's been taken away from us, so the way that we connect with each other is it's different these days. But you're right, the heart of it is that open connectedness.
And you know, I want to do more and more and more of these conversations, because I think they're important. In order for us to navigate these challenging times, I do believe that it is very important for us to connect to our spiritual selves, individually and collectively. And this is where I want the conversation and the movement to kind of start. So that's my goal. That's my mission. And just to spread love and joy, because that's what I know what I'm here for. I had just one more question.
Keep tossing them. I'm an open
question, because I love everything that you shared. You've been so honest. You've been so vulnerable, and just your truth, sharing your truth. I value that so much. So I thank you for that. What is one thing that you would tell your younger self that you think might have helped you along your, I like to say, spiritual journey, because really at the heart of it, it really is, it all ties together for me. That's just my personal opinion. So, but what is one thing that you would share with your younger self that you think would have helped you in your spiritual journey? I know that's heavy.
So many things I would share. You know what, I will say, like, I have no regrets about what has happened, you know, in my life and what I've had to go through. And, you know, the self-love journey, even like you know, going through my, you know, bullying and all this like negative stuff that has dictated my life for a long time, which has caused me to feel unworthy of myself, lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem. I've gone through a lot of that.
Yeah.
And when I think back, if I were to go, I have this memory of being bullied, like my earliest one of six years old.
Mm.
And if I could go back to that time, because that was the time I fully remember with full detail of how that felt, what the person who bullied me, what she looked like, what she said to me. If I could go back to my 6-year-old self and just hug her and say, remember that who you are is perfect, no matter what you go through, that's the one thing I would say. And hopefully that 6-year-old version of me can carry that through everything else. Because I think in life, we're going to go through these experiences that, I mean, the ones that do and that we retain stick out are the more negative ones, unfortunately. They scar us more. That's just I think the nature of how human beings have evolved. We tend to latch on to fear and anxiety more than happiness, right? I think after time you're like, what does happiness mean? Right. How is it supposed to feel like? I don't get it. And it becomes this like unknown feeling to you. But to answer your question, it would be that, just telling her that no matter what you go through, you are always perfect.
Yeah.
You're always perfect, but you're going to go through some growing pains, but that is part of the process you're going to go through.
Yeah.
And I say that because, the interesting thing is my dad died. It's like my angels had spoken to me as well when he passed. It's like literally in the hospital right after he passed. He's like, my guardian angel was saying to me, you're going to go through some stuff. It's going to be hard, but you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It was just a voice I couldn't even question. So I would translate that back to giving that to my 6-year-old self, that you're just going to go through that, but you're going to be okay, and add on, you're perfect.
Yeah.
No matter what happens.
Oh, that is so, that is so beautiful. Like my 6-year-old self is just like, just wanting that hug and that love and that validation. And I feel you on that one. And I felt that. I feel that.
It's love.
It is love. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story and your life and your journey with me. And you are the founder of Reaching New Depths. And talk to me about your coaching practice and what you offer. And if you want to throw out how we can contact you, that's cool too. So.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Well, first off, let me say, Sharmaine, it's great to reconnect with you after all these years.
Yeah.
And for giving me a safe platform. And the first time ever I've opened up about my sexuality and my story. And I hope for anyone who's watching this, I hope if you resonate with it, that you're not alone in it. I think we all go through different varying degrees of how we, quote unquote, come out. I would like to say it's more of how we discover ourselves, right? Because no matter who you are perfect. You're perfect who you are. And yes, we go through life where people tell us that we're not, and there's certain restrictions and whatnot. So for anyone who's going through that journey of feeling free, wanting to feel free or internal freedom within themselves, I totally get it. But the journey, I'm going to say, is worth it. Once you know that you can love yourself and accept yourself for who you are. It's one of those things where you're just like, I'm so glad I went through that.
Right.
So, tying that into my practice. So yes, I am the founder of Reaching New Depths Coaching. I've been a nurse for the last 13 plus years. So I've been a registered nurse, family nurse practitioner, and found that through my practice of being a nurse, that my personal superpower is having deep conversations like this with my patients. And I do take pride in providing safe spaces for my clients to feel honest and vulnerable with how they really feel. So I'm just, for an example, like I've had a lot of patients come in, like I have a stomach ache, I have XYZ. And what it ends up being is that there's something really personal within their lives that's troubling them, and they just didn't know how to really talk about it. So I felt that this was like one of my, my major superpower of being a nurse is that I can bring out the truth in people to help them navigate through that. So this is how, just a part of how Reaching New Depths Coaching, and even the name, right? Reaching New Depths. It's like reaching new depths within yourself, like digging in there to go higher within you. So I opened this practice just in May of this year. So when the pandemic was going on.
Yeah.
And what I tell people what I do is I help I guide my clients shine their light through the mastery of self-love. You know, and what that means is if you're going through something in your life right now where you feel like you've been putting it off, or you feel that there's a new part of you that you want to start new, that you want to change, or something that's been boggling you down, you feel depressed, you feel stuck, you feel lack of confidence, then that is what I personally work on. It's that inner energetic feeling that it's there. We just got to dig in a little bit and see what that is for you. But it also comes with my experience and background as a nurse too, because I do believe that there are different parts of health. It's not just your mental health, physical health. There are many aspects of it. So I come in with 13 plus years experience as a nurse to bring these to my clients, of helping them shine their light through their own eyes, not through mine, not through their family, not through anyone else, but first and foremost from themselves first. That's what's really key. And a lot of it, yes, does relate to my journey of self-love. I have personal experience in that, so I know, but that it can be a difficult journey. But like I said, I have compassion for any patient who comes through my door, and I will be there with you to hold your hand through the darkest time and through the trenches. It's part of the work. So I do offer virtual coaching right now, a 1 month and 3 month program. So for anyone who's interested, my website is www.rndnursecoach.com. And feel free, I am on Facebook under Rosemarie Dominia, or Instagram rndnursecoach, to talk with you personally about that. I do have a launch that's coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. I think a lot of people have asked, what I do in my practice and what I offer. So that launch and that webinar that's coming up is going to definitely touch on all bases of that. And honestly, like, if you're getting to know me now, like, I would not put my patients or clients through anything I wouldn't put through myself. So just know that, like, that is something, that's why I'm very open about my stories and being vulnerable, because it's the kind of work I think that has not been very, what's the word I want to use? It's the kind of work that is missing in the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Is this kind of it's this deeper work, right? But it is kind of scary. I will say it's not the easiest thing, but I will tell you, it's probably the one component, if you've tried everything else, that it's worth at least trying. Yeah. And that's what I want to stress out there. It's worth to at least try. So if this is, whoever's watching this, if this resonates with you, I'm more than happy to start a conversation, with you, and and see where that goes. And that's where all of it starts. It's just a conversation.
That is beautiful. It sounds like it's about healing the whole self.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. It's healing the whole self.
Yes.
The whole self. And
love it.
Yeah, the website has all the offers. I mean, I've had clients I've worked with already who really do now understand the value of the work. Sometimes we just need to be shown the way. So if this again resonates with anyone who's watching this, please feel free to reach out to me. Perfect.
And I will make sure to, when this is uploaded, to have all that in the comments too. So that is beautiful. Thank you. Rosie. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much for sitting in conversation with me. There's so much value in hearing about your journey and hearing about your stories that I think, we can learn from each other. And I think that this is going to be so valuable for anybody else that's going to be listening and watching, that, there's any number of things they can take from this conversation, but, at the forefront is love. And I got nothing but love for you, girl. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here with me. And I just look forward to seeing you continue to rise and see so much success, and to see you thrive. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much.